When I was in my early 20s, I took a trip away by myself to a caravan park in a well-known, picturesque town. I pitched my tent, set up my fire pit, ate my dinner by the fire while watching The Handmaid's Tale on my phone. It was the middle of winter, and rugging up by the fire was lovely. At some point, I see a face come out from the dark over the fire I had made for myself. I was a little startled at first, and thought initially she was going to ask me to put my fire out or something. Instead, she was quite friendly and asked if she could come and warm herself by my fire. I was not really in the mood for a conversation at that time of night as I was about to wrap up for bed, but invited her to come over anyway as she seemed fine. She looked like she was in her 60s or 70s. She asked me about my car, which at the time was a classic model, and we talked about that for a while, and how she drove one around when she was young in the 60s. The conversation at first was perfectly normal. The first unusual thing I noticed was that she had a rolled cigarette, which she kept relighting by sticking her arm in the fire. It did not seem to bother her at all, and she was moving quite slowly without recoiling from the heat. I cannot remember exactly where the conversation went or when exactly it got weird, but at some point her eyes widened and locked in on mine, and she started ranting a bit. She tried to make me sing a tuneless song about the environment she made in the 60s, and I seriously considered just singing it so she would go away. She told me that she had been institutionalized in a psychiatric hospital on multiple occasions, the most recent after she was found drawing pictures of penises being cut up with scissors. She spoke about how the police and her family were out to get her, deemed her a violent schizophrenic, and that every so often she gets injections from the doctor so that she can live outside the hospital. I cannot remember what else she said, but it was all pretty unsettling. I guess because it was dark, I did not realize that all she was wearing was a thin hoodie and a towel, until the towel dropped, leaving her naked from the waist down. She just said sorry and kept talking. I was seated and she came to stand pretty close to me. She told me that she was starving to death. She did not look like she was starving to death. I gave her some of my food. She, in her half-naked state, pulled me in for a close hug and told me that I was her only friend in the world. Eventually, I told her I needed to go to bed, and she told me not to put out my fire so that she would keep standing by it. I really did not want her hanging around my campsite while I was sleeping, and I felt responsible for my campfire. So when she went to the bathroom in her cabin, I quickly put the fire out and got into my tent hoping she would not come back, because I did not want to run into her again in the night. I pissed into a Tupperware container instead of walking outside to the bathroom. The next morning, I woke up to a group of peacocks around my tent, pecking at bits of bread and food which had been placed in a perfect circle around my tent. The caravan park is known for having peacocks. I am not sure exactly what I saw the next morning, but I have a feeling she was exposing herself to other campers from the porch of her cabin, which was just behind my tent site. I left a message for the caretaker of the caravan park about the woman and how she was mentally ill and being inappropriate. I packed up and left early that morning, not because I was scared of her, but I just could not be bothered. I feel sad for the woman, and I hope she eventually got the care she needed. But that does not make the whole experience any less uncomfortable. When I was in elementary school, maybe 4th to 6th grade, my friend's mom drove us to visit her grandma. It was about 45 minutes to an hour from our town. We drove there with my friend, my age, her little brother, and my sister, 1 year older than me. About 1 block from her grandma's house was a kid's playground. From her grandma's front door, you couldn't see the park, but you could see the entrance to it. The playground entrance was placed in between rows of houses right against the neighborhood street. Touching the far end of the playground was a bike path. On the other side of the bike path was a cornfield. Turning right and following the bike path, it continued into a forest preserve. Houses' backyards lined up along the bike path with a row of fences. Between their fences and the bike path was about a 12 to 15-foot wide section of corn that stretched along the bike path until the forest preserve. It felt like a pretty normal suburban neighborhood, like kids did in the late 90s or early 2000s. Me, my sister, friend, and her brother walked over to the park to play by ourselves. We were having a good time, playing the usual park games, etc. I saw cars drive by and didn't think much of it, but then I remember noting a large black van that drove by. I can't remember if it was a service van or a minivan, but I remember something feeling off, and I became more vigilant of the cars driving by. We continued to play. I was standing furthest from the street, or one could say closest to the bike path. My sister, friend, and brother were fairly close to the street. Suddenly, the black van approached again and stopped right in front of the park. I still remember it as if it happened yesterday. It felt like time slowed down. 5 people dressed in black got out of the van. The van drove away. They were wearing all black with black ski masks on. There was at least 1 or 2 women, and the rest were male. One of the males pointed right at me and yelled, "That's the one we want. Let's get her." Then, they all started running past my friend, her little brother, and my sister and ran right towards me. When I heard those words, I began running on the bike path as fast as I could. I jumped into the corn that stretched between the houses and bike path. I laid down on the ground. I covered my mouth and didn't move a muscle. I heard them turn the corner and were now on the bike path. One of them yelled, "I bet she ran down the bike path. She probably isn't far. We'll get her." I was terrified. I laid there as still as I could until I heard no one. I was afraid to return to the park in case the van was back. Through the corn, I assessed the fence and decided my only chance was to jump the fence. It was a large, maybe 5 or 6 foot fence. I knew that once I did, I would be closer to her grandma's house and could see her front door from that house's front yard. I stood up as quietly as I could. I jumped over it and ran through the yard. My sister and friend were near the front of that house, and we went back to her grandma's. I was so upset. My sister believed me. My friend thought I was making it up, and it must have just been older kids having fun. Her brother was too young to know. I don't remember if I told her mom. This happened about a year ago. I was living in a semi-shitty neighborhood, meaning that if you are a woman alone, you will get catcalled and bothered in the streets, maybe followed by insistent jerks if you are unlucky. But it was also mostly families, no hard drug consumption. So the buildings were always safe, and there were always people to help. I lived with 3 roommates, all of us women in our 20s and students. On my floor, there was only one other apartment, in which an elderly couple lived. Super nice and really involved in the building's life. They had been living in the apartment for 40 years. The husband had trouble walking and moving. One night, I am woken up by super loud screams and banging on our door. I get out of bed to go see, and 2 of my roommates, the last one, slept through it. To this day, I do not understand how she did it. Do as well. We are in front of the door, and we realize that the guy is actually banging on our neighbor's door so loud that we heard it. We did not want to turn the light on for fear that he would see it under our door and try to get in our apartment. We are in the dark, talking as quietly as possible so he will not hear us, and so we can listen to what he says. We look through the peephole, and the guy has something in his hand, but we can't see if it is a weapon. I do not live in the US, so no gun, but maybe a knife. The guy is screaming for my neighbors to come open the door. He is calling them by name, saying that he is going to get in and that if they do not open the door, he won't be kind to them. I call the police, and the operator asks if there are ways for them to get in the building. We have no way of opening the gates remotely, so I tell her no, and that they will have to find a way to get in because the guy is clearly trying to harm my neighbors. She says, "Why call if we can't get in?" and hangs up on me. My roommate then calls the police again, and fortunately, it is another operator that picks up and sends a patrol. By that time, the guy has stopped screaming but is still in the hallway, and we can hear a weird noise coming from our neighbor's door. He leaves the building by the elevator, and we are debating whether or not one of us should get out of the apartment, try to get to the first floor, not by the elevator, to open the door for the police. But we don't know if he is still in the building, so we stay inside. After like 10 minutes, we get out of the apartment to see if our neighbors are okay, and we see that the guy has carved a giant X on the door, so definitely with a knife or something sharp enough. The police get here, do not even get out of their car, they just circle the building 2 times and leave. We never heard back from them. You can understand how livid we were. We later learned that my neighbors were on vacation for the week, so the apartment was empty and they escaped a probable heart attack from the sheer madness that was this night. I got the wife on the phone and she was like, "No need to tell my husband. It is probably a deranged old tenant. It won't happen again." And I was like, "Ma'am, there is a giant X carved on your door. He is going to find out that a psycho tried to hurt you." A week later, I come back from work and see 2 policemen in the elevator. Apparently, some teenagers found it amusing to block the elevator on the 10th floor, so they came to give them a fine or something. I tell them the story and they tell me, "Next time you should call the police." And I was like, "No shit, Sherlock, I would never have guessed that on my own." So anyway, I moved out of this building a few months after. We never had something that extreme happen again, but we got 2 more weird things happen to us. One teenager, like 17, bangs on our door to ask for painkillers for his grandmother, and like strong stuff like the equivalent of tramadol, so obviously we did not open the door. One guy tried to give us food. He was weirdly insistent about it, even though we refused like 4 times and came back to the apartment twice. The last time he just left the bag of food by our door. We did not take any risk and threw everything out for fear that he had done something to it. Once again, we are 4 young women. So yeah, enjoy. It had been some time already that I wanted to vent about the cops and how utterly useless they were to 4 terrified young women. This happened around a year ago. For anonymity, my friends will be referred to as Sadie, 19-year-old female, and Anna, 19-year-old female. Anna lives in a sort of rural area and has access to a nearby private lake. We have been to this lake many times and have never felt unsafe. This night was like any other. We gathered some pool floats and set out to enjoy the lake and gossip about recent occurrences in our life. I feel I should explain the layout of this area. To get to the lake, you have to drive through a neighborhood. The lake is down a small hill with a patch of pavement at the top of the hill for parking. Further past the docks where you can access the lake is woods. About an hour in, me and Sadie were swimming while Anna was sitting on the dock. We all notice a man walking nearby. He seemed to be carrying some type of tool. It was dark, so we could not make out what it was. We took notice of him, then went back to our conversation. After a couple minutes, I got out of the water to start drying off. It is then that me and Anna see the man walking past us again towards our cars. At this point, it was not a problem in my mind, because I thought he was leaving. Anna keeps watching him while Sadie and I talk and notices that instead of walking away by our cars, he goes behind a porta potty at the entrance to where our cars are. This is when the red flags start raising and I start freaking out. 20 minutes goes by and there has not been any sight of the man. After some careful consideration, we all decide to leave. It is important to mention that I get freaked out very easily, and that sometimes people like to joke about things to get me more paranoid. We start walking back to where we parked with our phone flashlights on. Suddenly, Sadie and Anna stop. I thought they were joking with me, so I continue to walk ahead a few steps before turning around. When I turn around, their eyes are fixated on something. I turn back to see what they were looking at, and there is the man. He is walking straight towards us. We start running back to the dock while I am crying and yelling at my friends to call the police. We did, and while Anna was on the phone with them, we all witnessed the man run by our cars and out of sight. The police eventually show up and escort us to our cars, and we all book it out of there. Thinking back on this story, I still wonder what he was carrying into the woods. What was he planning to do? When I was 19, my girlfriend and I had to make a 3 to 4 hour drive about every 2 weeks because she lived in northern Germany and I lived in central Germany. So we would take turns staying at each other's places. We usually left in the late afternoon, but sometimes it got later, like it did on this particular night. It was around 10:30 p.m. in November. We had already been driving on the highway for about 2 hours when my girlfriend said she really needed to use the bathroom. I normally hate stopping at rest stops, especially when it's cold, dark, and lightly raining outside like it was that night, but it was the quickest option, so I pulled into the next rest stop. To our surprise, the place was completely empty, which is actually pretty unusual in Germany. It wasn't one of those bigger rest stops with a Burger King or a gas station either. There was literally just a small 5-sided bathroom building lit up by fluorescent lights and nothing else. My girlfriend got out and went to the bathroom, and I walked her there. Our car was parked about 10 meters from the bathroom. I stood impatiently outside the door, keeping an eye on the entrance to the rest stop, but also on everything else around me. Nobody feels particularly safe at a completely deserted highway rest stop at night. Finally, my girlfriend came back, and we slowly started walking toward our car when suddenly another car pulled into the rest stop. It was blue, some kind of small car, but I couldn't tell what brand it was. The only thing that really stood out was the license plate, which I had never seen anything like before. It was hanging slightly crooked. The driver drove quickly toward the bathroom and parked 2 spaces away from us. My girlfriend and I looked at each other and immediately had the same thought: get in the car. Now, the car was now parked to our right. Normally, I would have just pressed the unlock button, but my car's battery was dead, so I had to unlock it manually. The car could only be opened from the passenger side, so I had to walk around to the left side of the car, open the door for my girlfriend, walk around the car again, and then get in myself. I was just unlocking the passenger door with the key when the man got out of his car. He looked kind of disheveled and was wearing a brown jacket. I honestly can't remember much else about what he looked like because I was mainly focused on his right hand. He had been keeping it behind his back the entire time, ever since he got out of his car. I was just around the back of my car when he was suddenly only about 2 meters away from me. He started walking toward me quickly while saying something I couldn't understand. I ignored him, yanked the door open, immediately slammed it shut behind me, and locked all the doors from the inside. While I was starting the car as quickly as possible, he was still standing right next to the window. It was only when I put the car in reverse and started moving that he finally stepped back a little. Unfortunately, I couldn't see what he was holding in his hand in the rearview mirror, and to this day, I still wonder what exactly he wanted from us. Obviously, I know he wasn't approaching me because he wanted to hand me a suitcase full of money. He clearly didn't seem to have good intentions, but at the same time, he somehow seemed way too scruffy and disheveled to be some kind of kidnapper, human trafficker, or organ thief.